So hello everybody, welcome to Whining On. My name's Matthew Bowden, the Inculture Rogue, and today we have Pete Mielniczek. Pete, how you doing?
Hi, I'm all right. I've got a bit of a bad back, but I'm all right. And I think I've got a cold coming on. But apart from, I mustn't moan though. I mustn't moan. It's really good to be here, and it's really good to talk to you, Matt. And
Same. I'm very much looking forward to our interview today. And so let's cut through the faff and get straight into it.
okay, I'm just making myself look good.
You adjust yourself.
Because I know, what's it you said? There's how many millions of people watching?
There's on average a few hundred people watch each video. We've done 78
200
videos
million.
now. A few hundred million, exactly that. A few hundred million every video without question.
Brilliant. All right. Well, I'm going to try and stay relaxed. And that's your job, really, isn't it?
Well, I'm going to attempt to help keep you relaxed, my dear. You just keep adjusting yourself until you find a place you can sit in.
Yeah. It's terrible. It's all this online stuff, and you end up looking at yourself all the time. It makes you self-conscious.
Well, my advice would be to stare boldly at the other person. I tend to now, after doing
That
about...
means you.
Yes, exactly. After doing nearly
Yeah.
80 videos, I find the death nail of looking relaxed
Oh, you're
is looking at
so
yourself.
vain.
What can I say? What can I say?
All right, then. I'll try looking at you. All right. Lovely.
So,
That's working. It's taken my mind right off it.
there you go. So, when you began performing, when you were a young person, what was young Pete's life like?
What do you mean when I was a young person? God, the cheek. But I know what you mean. I'm looking at you again. What was the question again?
So, what was life like for young Pete? Were you a performer as a child? Were you from a theatrical family?
Oh, I see. As a child, you mean the young? Oh, you do mean young, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like a frog.
Right, yeah. Well, I mean, well, generally, no, I wasn't from a theatrical background. I mean, I was born in Brixton, South London, in 1960. It was, and but we were just like, it was very sort of working class family, Polish father, Irish mother, immigrant working class, South London, and there was no theatricality actually. That came later. I think my first sort of, I mean, I can't even remember us really going to the theatre or not. We went to see Billy Smart's Circus once when I was about 7, and I hated it. I got really scared, and I found it really unpleasant. But I think when I was about 16, 17 was my first foray. And it wasn't consciously like I wanted to be a performer or anything. It was, I used to hang around Putney. I had some friends in Putney, and they used to go to this place called Group 64, which was a youth theatre. And at the end of each run, at the end of each production, they'd have a party, a rap party. And so we got wind of this. And so we used to start gate crashing these parties. And we'd go to the last night's show and then sort of like hang around in this big church building, which was turned into the theatre. It was a beautiful spot. And we used to, because there were girls there and beer, and we were like 17, and it was just fantastic. So after we gate crashed these parties a couple of times, one of the directors, I can't remember his name, and he sort of came over to us and went, hi guys, I'm glad you're having such a great time. Have you ever thought of like joining in? And we were kind of going, no, we're just here for the beer and the girls. And but eventually he sort of persuaded us, or at least he persuaded me. And I think, what? No, I was the only actually I was the only one. Anyway, I got sort of press ganged, as it were, gently press ganged into a production, and I think it was Alan Bleasdale play called No More Sitting on the Old School Bench, and it was set in a school, and there are teachers played by the adults, and there's school kids played by the usual kids who, some of which I'd been trying to sort of date, let's say. And so that was my first stage experience, Group 64 Theatre in Putney.
And
then
why did you take it up and none of your other mates did?
That's a good question. I don't know. You're right. And maybe I did have some pretensions to performing. I think, well, some of my mates did. There were a couple of us who did. There was some actual really cool kids who I met subsequently. But when I said none of my mates did, I mean my original mates. There were about 3 or 4 of them who I went with the first time. None of them joined. But
were you excited when he asked you, or did you think, well, it's just I can keep going to the parties if I go here and try and do this?
That's exactly what I thought. That's very astute, very perspicacious of you. I remember that happening, going through my head. I thought, well, may as well, because it means I don't have to gate crash anymore, and I can just be a bit more relaxed and actually go to the parties legitimately. That's exactly what I did think. Yeah, I thought it'd be a way in.
And did it change once you were in, when you started rehearsing and developing the work? Did it strike you as something you enjoyed?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It really did. And I was as commonly mentioned by actors throughout time, I got the bug, as it were. And I can remember being on stage and feeling like, oh, I really quite like this. And whether I was good or bad, I was probably quite who knows, but I wasn't a very practiced actor, but that's safe to say. But I did really enjoy being on stage, and that developed more and more over time. And also at that age, I really had no idea what I couldn't contextualize it or anything. I didn't really know what I was experiencing, but I did know, oh, this is nice. And then I think it was by the second production, it was a pantomime, and I had a role as literally a spear carrier, and my only job was to come out about halfway through at some point while they were changing the set. I was that kind of filler thing, and I had to come out the tab and stand there for about 5 seconds, and then the fairy would come out stage left, and I'd have to turn with my spear and go, halt, who goes there? And that was it. And one night I missed my cue, and I think I was having going to the toilet or something, and people were shouting at me in the green room, Pete, you're on now. I went, what? You're on now. And I missed my cue. So by the time I ran out, there was this atmosphere in the audience. It was quiet and still, and people going, what's going wrong? Something's gone wrong. And then I ran out the curtain, out of breath, with my spear, and I had this moustache drawn on as well. And I think I just managed to finish it off and get on. So I had this wonky moustache, and I got on stage, and I just stopped kind of like that. And I just stopped and looked at the audience, and I got a laugh. And I went, oh. And I sort of went, all right, I mustn't corpse. I was told you shouldn't corpse. So I tried to keep the straight face. And I sort of stood up, and I went, and when I stood up straight, the audience started laughing more, and it sort of increased and increased. And the more I tried not to they make me smile, and the more I tried not to laugh, the more the audience were really getting into it. And then some of my mates at the back who were watching going, and then I really cracked, and then the audience started laughing, and it ended up the whole audience just laughing at me, standing the front of the stage with my spear and this moustache thing, and I was getting this big laugh. And then Fairy came on and went, at the end of the show, one of the actors came up, I think her name was Liz, at the end of the run, and she said, that's right, everyone was asking, why, what happened? What happened out there? What happened? We could hear the audience laughing. And I was just going, I don't know, I just went out and, I started laughing. And at the end of the run, this actress, she was wonderful. I think her name was Liz, and she was a real old darling, very, very theatrical. And she said, darling, I hope you don't mind me saying this to you. And I said, no, what? And I was expecting to hear, you're a great actor and you should really be one of the stars or something. And she said, I think you're a clown. And I was furious. And I didn't say anything. I was really disappointed. I was, clown? She thinks I'm some kind of clown. And I didn't realise what it meant. And I was really sort of...
You had no context.
no context. And I was a bit upset about it. I thought she was going to tell me I was, like some great actor. I can't even remember. But then a couple of years later, when I got into mime and clowning and all that business, and I remembered, and it was like a flash, and it went back like 4 years or 3 years back, and I went, that's what she meant. And it's funny. But she saw it, and I didn't, because I was just an adolescent into beer and girls. So that was my first experience.
Yeah. Can I ask you one favour? Can we get your microphone just underneath something like a scarf? Maybe it's just tapping, creating a bit of sound, and it's moving about.
Oh, it's tapping.
It's tapping, mate. It's tapping.
Don't want that. Sorry. Do you want me to do that whole anecdote again now?
No. It was a wonderful anecdote. We got it through.
Once is enough.
Yeah.
Once is enough, Pete.
So
better.
That's better, much better.
Is this a ploy to make me look even more ridiculous?
Yeah, we're just going to slowly change your dress as we continue the show. So, why did you go and do mime after this then?
This whole question at the beginning of why did I start performing? There's about 4 or 5 different threads that lead, or different paths that go into it. The reason I started to do mime was because I was, and still am, in love and infatuated with David Bowie. And I remember reading about him that he used to do mime and stuff. And I idolised him, I still do. And God bless him. And I had it in my head that I would become a mime, or I'd do mime. And I thought this was really poetic and creative and artistic or whatever. Or if David's good, if David can do it, then maybe I can do it. And I think that was a foundation of it, a stem of it. The other reason was I was completely lost. I'd been thrown out of school, and I flunked my A levels, and I really didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what to do. I had no idea what my goal was, what my passion was, and I was really sort of lost. I was adrift in all ways. And so I just plopped for this mime course at the City Lit. And the other great thing was...
I think someone's at my door. Please carry on. I'll be back in 2 seconds.
Hey, that's a cliffhanger. I was just... All right. Well, I'm glad he's gone. Okay. Now, the rest of the 5 million of us here. Good. Now, it's just you and me. So... I don't know if any of you were familiar with the City Lit in London. It's an adult education institute in London. It's still running now, but it's very different to what it was in the 80s. And anyway, they used to do a lot of a whole range of courses. They did humanities, sciences, languages, but they had a really good theatrical department. And that's what I think of Matt Bowden. But hello, you're back.
Hey.
So I was talking about the City Lit. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I've definitely heard it before in these interviews. It seemed like an incredible resource for people.
Right. Well, I met a lot of amazing people there that I still that are still on the circuit, and I'm still friends with. They did a mime course. They did loads. They did mime, clown. I did the clown summer school there. They did, physical theatre, Japanese theatre. They did Commedia dell'arte. Barry Grantham was a teacher there. Amazing, Barry and Joan Grantham.
And it was all for a couple of quid, if I'm right.
A couple of quid. If you were signing on, you could get a course for 2 quid. And basically, I went there. I started off with the mime, and there was a guy called Pierre Hollins teaching the mime, and he said, I'm sorry, the mime is full, the class is full, but I teach a clown class as well. It's on the Tuesday. And I went, clown? I was still at that stage. Oh, clown, I want to be a mime. And I went, all right. He persuaded me, and I went, all right then. So I went and did the clown class, and I think on the first day I did this. First night, I can remember how nervous I was going into the class. I was so nervous. I'd never been. Okay, I'd been on stage before, like I said. I was about 20, 21 now, so it was about 3 years previous, which is a lifetime when you're that age. But I got into this class and I was so nervous. And
Why?
then,
Why were you so nervous? I mean, we can talk now about how the clown is vulnerability and all this kind of contextual knowledge of the clown, but you surely didn't know that then. What was making you so nervous about it?
well, I was just really insecure as a person. I still am, and but back then I was so shy and insecure that I wouldn't talk to people. I could hardly talk to people. I was really that bad. I was so inhibited, and part of that was the fact that I didn't know where I fitted in. I didn't know. Other friends of mine were going to art school, and I'd go to their parties, and they were all being wild because they were in their groove and in their peers, and they knew what they were doing, and they had references. And I was like an interloper. I was a fraud, and it was like, what was I doing? I wasn't doing anything. So I was really inhibited, and I think generally I sort of still am deep down. And but a great cure for that is being on stage. And so I got into this class, and I think Pierre Hollins picked me out on one of the first exercises, and I just did something with this other guy who I think we were driving a car, miming a car journey or something, and I did something with a window or something, and I got this laugh, like the whole class laughed, and I can remember that to this day, and it was like, wow, that was affirmation, and I hadn't had anything like that ever. It was just a class full of smelly clowns, and but it was brilliant. It was brilliant. It was a success, and I went, oh, I quite like this. I think I might try a bit more. And you know, the more you learn about something, the more you realise how little you know about it, and so you get more and more interested and more inspired. And I ended up doing a 2-year mime course, signing up for a 2-year mime course, but with teachers called Lorna Marshall, Australian teacher. I think she's still teaching now. And Ronald Wilson, who was ballet trained. He was with Madame Rambert Company. I think he was really old school. And he had such, I mean, Lorna Marshall was great as well. Such a breadth of knowledge. And Ronald Wilson was just, he was like a link into the old. He wasn't old enough to be musical, but he was like 1 degree of separation from it. He knew all the characters, but the person who really had that connection was Barry Grantham. And so I did a 2-year mime course. I did the clown summer school, which had Barry Grantham teaching commedia dell'arte, Max Oddball teaching juggling, and Frankie Anderson teaching clown, and someone else, maybe Pierre Hollins. Who else was there? There was loads of people, and I just signed up for everything at City Lick. John Moat, I did Mask with John Moat. He's amazing, still amazing.
And what was your view of the art form as you go into all these courses? What was your understanding beginning to congeal to be?
Looking back on it, it was just kind of ecstatic, I think is a word for it. I was naive enough to be completely enthralled to it, and it wasn't an ego thing, but it's just basically, to put it bluntly, I didn't know how crap I was, so I just completely absorbed everything, and I found the whole thing just totally inspiring. I was fascinated by everything. I did kabuki theatre. I did any kind of theatre. I became ravenous to do any kind of theatre exercises, and I got more and more into the physicality of it. I got really into mime, and clowning became more and more, but mainly physical theatre at that point.
And were you doing shows, or was this all held in the workshop space?
No, it was all workshop. 2 years. I remember at one point deciding that I couldn't get into drama school, so I was going to get my theatrical education at the City Lit, and I signed up for everything. And I was going there practically full time. I had signed up for so many courses. I was there practically every day for 2 years with whatnots, this and that, one evening here and there, whatever. And so I was just, what was the question again?
Well, I was just interested in how you viewed yourself and the art form, the ideas that were congealing at that time about what you were doing and what you were going to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was evolving a bit away from the David Bowie mime fantasy, and then it became a new reality of actually what it was like to physically perform and learn the skills and develop the awareness and the physical vocabulary and all this and the history of it, and all fascinating. And I just became enthralled to it all, and it was like swimming in it. I mean, everything. I was picking out everything, and I hadn't been on stage, which was great because that didn't have a chance to burst the bubble yet of my I wasn't grandiose. I was just beautifully naive about it all.
But also maybe as well, it didn't force you into a small box, which performing in front of a crowd maybe could do, because you want to get the laughter and you want to get the.
No, sorry. Yeah, it didn't, and it was the world was my oyster because I hadn't been forced into any direction or anything, and but I can remember one thing just leading to another. For example, one mime class, Ronald Wilson told us to go to the Hayward Gallery because there was a Rodin sculpture exhibition on. And he said he wanted us to study the forms, the physicality of the Rodin sculptures. So then I was suddenly into Rodin. I went, wow, it's amazing, the sculptures. And so I got into that. And each thing led to another thing. And they were talking about music hall and ballet and ballet Rambert and ballet russe and Diaghilev and just everything. And it brought this whole world to me. And it felt like this was a magical world, a magical place I wanted to be. So I was just, I was just hooked.
Where did you see a future at this point then? Did you have an idea of the end point that was coming up, or a perceived end point?
Yeah, no, I didn't. I didn't give a damn about any of that. I was just floating along, swimming along, and just enjoying every moment of it. And the hard reality of, getting a show together or getting a company together or dying on stage, or having arguments with cast, or just all negative things were down the road, and I hadn't experienced any of that, and it didn't matter. Great. I was up with the stars. It was all to come. I didn't really plan. I didn't have a plan. I never have done, really. Maybe that's not quite a good thing.
So when you reached the end of this intensive learning period, what did you think to do next? What was the next step? Because it maybe at that time must have been tempting to just stay in this mode of, skill acquisition and keep learning. I assume you moved away from it at that point.
Yeah, there was definitely a temptation to do that and just become a workshop junkie, definitely. But then they were very good at the summer school. Frankie Anderson took us all out at the end of the term. I think it was a 3-week clown summer school. And we had a practical at the end. So she took us out. We all had to have a character and a number to play at this festival she had a connection with. It was just near London, Kingston or Wimbledon or something. It was just an outdoor festival thing. And all the clowns from the clown school went out with characters and were bloody awful, really terrible. But we were forced out to do it. I remember the first performers I saw there, because I didn't really know about street theatre even at that point. I was sort of still in a world of mask and mime and whatever. Don't know where I was actually, up with the fairies, but I remember that first outing we played, and I saw Lady Christabel and Scrotum, otherwise known as Patty B and Ross Foley. Yeah. And they just blew my mind. I just went, oh my God, who are these characters? And if you don't know Patty B and Ross, she plays this really down at heel aristocratic lady, and her hair's all skewed out. She has a beautiful gown and jewelry and one earring missing, and her lipstick's a bit askew. She's got champagne glass. She goes, oh no, I must tell you, dear. And she's just fantastic, and she's brilliant, quick as you like, improviser. And Ross goes behind as the hapless butler. He's very impeccably turned out with a tray and a bottle of champagne, and yes, milady, and that was it. That was the dynamic. But they were absolutely fantastic, and that was my first experience of anything like that. Going, oh wow, yeah, wow, you can do that.
And
that's how it's done.
And what did you think about when you saw him for the first time? What was
it was complete adulation. I was in awe, and I just went, wow. It didn't even occur to me that I could attain anything like that. They were just like, godlike things. Like, wow, that's amazing. I could probably shuffle around and do my little things here, but that's another, that's another league. That's another dimension. So that's how I viewed them.
Did your logical mind click in with all the things you'd learn of the art of physical theatre and of physical comedy, of clown and mime? Did you start looking at it and taking it apart and understanding why it worked, or just awe it as a complete thing?
I don't think I did, actually. I wasn't sort of like mechanical, materialistic about it. I was more, it's going to sound pretentious, but I was more instinctive with it. I was, and I just sort of took it in. I never really analysed it, and I'm still very bad at analysing it now. So I was just very open to it. I just felt like I felt a connection to it, and I was just very open to learning everything. And I had no agenda or technique or blueprints or anything like that. It was all very organic, as far as I remember. And I remember there was another guy at the clown course called Steve Rose, and the other great thing about being naive is you just go for things. You have this openness of like, yeah, I could do that. I'll have a go at that. If someone had invited me to do a spot on the London Palladium in front of the Queen on that day in Wimbledon, dressed up like some git, I would have gone, yeah, all right, yeah, I'll do that, and I would have done it. And because that's the wonderful thing when you're learning at the beginning, you just you do anything. You do know fear, but you just don't realize how crap you are. You're not aware of how. And this guy Steve Rose from the Clown Cast, we did a cabaret in Kilburn. The alternative cabaret scene was happening. I was in quite good flow at that point. That was about
what year are you at?
I think we're it's about 86 now, 1986. So the comic strip had already happened, and there was a lot of New Variety. It was called Cast. There was a company called Cast New Variety, and there were a lot of alternative cabarets. It was called, starting up all over the place, running for quite a while at that point, in fact. But I did this thing in Kilburn, this guy Steve Rose, and we basically did a clown number, silent, for about 12 minutes with a ladder, a white sheet, and a bucket and a bottle of water. And we rehearsed it, being quite sort of clown purist about it. We're going, oh yeah, blah, blah. But when we got on stage, everything went wrong, and we started getting laughs here, there, and everywhere where we totally hadn't rehearsed or expected it, because we weren't that adept. But we played with it, and we were just funny, and I remember it just being hilarious, and it was beginner's luck maybe or whatever, but again, it was another moment like at Group 64 with that laugh and the laugh in the classroom. It was like, wow, I could do this. And you need those little.
Definitely. And maybe there was a thing of not being too knowledgeable about oneself and clamping down. You allowed the mistakes to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I wasn't. I wasn't. I didn't have a massive, grandiose opinion of myself. I developed that later on, but I've gotten rid of it. I only had it for a while, then I learned how to get rid of that. But at the beginning stage, I was definitely naive, open, malleable.
So,
And
did you go and do a lot of this alternative cabaret circuit then? Was this the first route onto a regular performing life?
it was. I was heading down that road, and then I met another guy from the clown cast called Sham, and he said, "Hey, let's go and do a street show." You know? And we did. So I kind of veered off. I still did a couple of cabaret gigs, but I didn't go onto that circuit. We started doing street shows. We hitched up to Cambridge and did the gate crash the Strawberry Fair, and did an awful juggling thing there. And we were actually wearing clown makeup. And so we started working together, and then so I went down that path, and then we ended up. He said, "Let's go to Covent Garden because there's street stuff in Covent Garden." And I went, "No, Covent Garden's where that's like the gods. They don't go and set foot in that place." But he had more blag than I did, and so we started working in Covent Garden. And
What was your first time arriving there like to work?
oh, I can't remember specifically, but I know that very quickly I started to get on quite well with the other performers there, if I remember correctly. I was totally in awe, and I was very sort of like, oh God, what am I going to say? I knew where I was, and I knew the quality of the people there, and I knew instinctively, right, keep your eyes open and you can learn from these people. And I had no attitude about it, and I was there, and I knew where I was at, and I knew that. And when I got there, I mean aside the act that we were doing, which is just very rough, let's say, but I just watched the other acts there. Now, I'd never really been to Covent. I think I've been there once, drunk, once, but I hadn't really experienced any of the street shows there. Now, I'd seen a lot of cabaret, I'd seen a lot of mime, seen a lot of theatre, and mime theatre and dance and everything, but I hadn't seen much street theatre apart from Patty B and Ross, really, and a few other things. And then I got to Covent Garden, and I saw Chris and Alex Dandridge and Chris Adams doing their juggling unicycle clown routine, and I was just mind boggled. And I watched it again the next week, and it was just as mind boggling, but they were improvising as well. And I didn't realize that they had a set show. That's how naive I was. I thought these performers were doing amazing things. They'd come there and they'd make this whole show up.
They're making it up on the spot. How are they
And
all
they
doing that?
make it up on the spot, didn't they? And then I started to. God, I learned. It was such a great learning ground. It was,
Were they welcome for you to come and learn there? Was it a warm environment? Were they kind gods?
It was a bit of both. I mean, I think you navigate these spaces, don't you, in your own way. I can remember people not being overly friendly, but why should they be? It was a place of work. So, but I remember having a laugh there and getting to know people quite easy. Brian Reed. I mean, he had just amazing show. And I remember at one point under the portico, I didn't really know him, and there's this other performer, Jane Worth, and someone else there, and Brian went up to me and said, "Give us a snog," and I thought I was being all improvised. I went, "Yeah, all right then," and then he just went, "Right," on me, and I went, "Ah!" And everyone else pissed themselves. I didn't know Brian, and I just thought he was blagging, and he didn't. He just went straight for me and stuck his tongue down my throat. It was disgusting. So I don't know. I was a bit, yeah. So yeah, I got on with people quite well, I think, and and I was still in the learning stage, so I was really great. I'd sort of see these amazing performers. I remember watching, you know, like Chris and Alex. They were really the gods. But Captain Keno, I remember walking him filling the whole piazza, and I was terrified, in awe of how big an audience and the show he was. And he was in command then, and he was running the pillar, and it was full on massive spectacle. Rarely seen there's only a few people who fill the piazza that big, and that was really roaring. I can remember coming to Covent Garden in the morning and walking up from Trafalgar Square and Charing Cross Station and up there, and before I even got to like Henrietta Street, I could feel the electricity on the back of my neck from the shows that were happening. That's how big the atmosphere was when some of them rocked. And I was like watching, you know, Duncan Trillo, the magician, and Steve Rawlins, juggler, and if I started mentioning, I'd miss out too many. Tony Anthony was doing massive shows, and I was learning from all these people. Andre Vincent, he was brilliant. He blew me away. He would just go out with nothing and some breadsticks and do this amazing audience participation. Melvin Artvarg. I remember seeing him and just going, "Oh my God!" He did the following shows. The first time I saw a following show, I think he was friends with Pony in Paris. I'm not sure that I could be making that up, but anyway, he came and had the perfect, impeccable following show. It was just amazing. He had the whole piazza. My God, that was an amazing atmosphere as well. And so I was seeing all these fantastic people, and it just went on and on over the years. All the people passing through.
So when you saw these fantastic people, say the first few weeks, first few months, first year that you're there, how are you integrating that into yourself? How are you developing your own work? What does your show begin as? What does it start changing into, being around these people?
Yeah, that's a good point. I got in awe of. I kind of got into juggling, and I sort of, I don't know. I think I left the sort of the mimey clown thing behind a bit and got really into juggling because it was something you could do and you practice and stuff. And also when I was working with Sham, we were doing a juggling act, I guess. So I was learning that, and I got into those. I started getting into skills quite a lot. But when Sham and I stopped working, which we were only working Covent Garden for maybe 6 months. I think we stopped at the beginning of '87, and then I went solo at the beginning of '87, and then I was going to go two ways. I was either going to do a sort of Melvin Artvarg type following show, and there was a guy, Dr. Stewart, was there as well, and he was like amazing. I thought, well, maybe I could do something like that, a sort of dance mime thing, or I could carry on with the juggling, and the juggling was a safer bet. So when I went solo, I went and started doing the juggling.
What do you mean by safer bet?
Because I already had a few little skills under my belt, and I knew I could do the apple eating routine and to get me out there, because it's quite tough. It was like starting all over again. I'd done a little bit of a start with an apprenticeship, if you like, maybe with Sham. But then when I went solo, it's starting from scratch again. I've always been more fond of working with other people, and going out on your own is another dynamic. So
and did you feel
it was a safer bet?
Yeah, it's more reliable. You can reliably get.
I knew I could use that as a springboard. I think, right, I'll start off with a devil stick and do the apple eating routine, and then I can build on that. I was never it was never in my bones to actually sit down and devise and write a 30-minute show and take it out. I was always improvisorial, if you can say that. So yeah. I'd start off somewhere and go, right, I'm not going to stay there, but at least that will get me out, and then we'll see where that moves on to.
You stick a skeleton together, throw it out there, and see what flesh gets thrown on it as you begin working.
Yeah. Whether it dies.
Yeah, well, it returns to the grave.
Yeah. Thank you. That's what I was. Yeah.
So Did you have success with this then? You split up with Sham. You're doing your solo act. You go out there with a few juggling props, put together a juggling show. Is that a successful show by your own assumptions?
I remember it being hard work and it taking, it felt like a long time. It was probably only a few months of getting into my own dynamic and my own thing, of basically relying on my play with the audience rather than my play with a partner in the audience. So that took a few months, and that was trial and error. And but there again, I'd just go and ask people in Covent Garden for advice, and you had the best people in the world there to give you advice and tips, and people were generous, and they would watch you and go, hey, have you tried doing this, have you tried doing that? It wasn't all bitchy nastiness. There was bitchy nastiness there as well, a bit of bullying and stuff. You know, it wasn't, you know, the angels, but there was a lot of support as well and a lot of creativity. And so there was plenty to draw on, you know, and just trying to think. I mean, yeah, loads of people to ask advice from.
So I talked to Graham Scott, and Graham Scott said that you were the biggest show there with a tall unicycle at one point, a giraffe unicycle, and you were the first wave of this, you know, epidemic of giraffe unicycles that followed shortly after. Is there any validity in that?
That's great, Graham Silver.
Yeah, Silver.
Yeah,
Silver.
yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. No, well, he's got impeccable. He's very astute. No, I wasn't the first person to do a tall unicycle in Covent Garden, but I did develop, after I went out solo, after a few months and I got the rhythm of it, I was doing a small unicycle. I had a little ringmaster. And I got into unicycling because I'd seen this guy called Danny Hignett. And he was the most amazing unicyclist and clown. And I was in complete awe of him. I mean, he was a genius. He still is a genius. He lives in Scotland now. And he's so that's got me into the unicycle. And I was doing a unicycle show for a bit. And someone, I can't remember who it was, basically could have been, bless you. I don't know, it could have been Nick Nicholas, it could have been Keno, it could have been Sean Gandini, he was there at the time. Oh, Eddie Izzard, who mustn't forget Eddie Izzard. I mean, these are all the people I was learning from. So someone said, why don't you do a tall unicycle? And I went, oh, can you do that? What? But I thought only Chris and Alex did that. And this guy, Danny Hignett, and he had a tall unicycle. And I think, so it was, you know, there were other people with tall unicycles there. But I just did I developed a tall unicycle act. So I had, you know, I'd start off with my hat routine. Then I had this routine with a kid jumping up and down on a chocolate bar. That was a very original routine.
So what was that routine? If you want to describe it in a little bit more, flesh out the description a bit more so we could understand it.
It was the tension, the theatrical tension of having a young child jump up and down on something that they treasure, i.e. a chocolate bar, and the contradiction in the instinct of the child to preserve the chocolate bar and eat it, and me telling the child to jump up and down on it. And it was really nice. I mean, there were lots of gags and stuff in it, but it got a great reaction from the audience. And the audience to boo me. I could jump up and down on it. And at that point, the audience, there was a pause, and it was better if the kid didn't jump on it straight away, because then the audience would go, no, and they'd boo me and everything. And it was about a 10-15 minute routine. It built and built and built. It was lovely. And it was a really, really good crowd build as well. And so I did that, and then I got my tall unicycle, and I got 2 volunteers out and got them to do hay and do a big sort of circus presentation thing. And I did other stuff. Then I got on the unicycle, and you know, and I juggled at the end of the show. I juggled 3 torches, and I think my line, Jim Woodcock likes this line that I used to say, which is, and now my final trick. my only trick, in fact. And it was, because it was the only thing I did, was that eventually at the end I'd just juggle 3 torches on the unicycle. But it became, I honed it, and like I said, I wasn't the first person to ride a unicycle, but I was the only person doing. Were Chris and Alex still working at that point? I think, I'm not sure, I can't quite remember. I think I don't know, can't remember, but I was the only person doing a sort of tall unicycle show solo, that with just other foolishness around it. So anyway, yeah, Silver's the person to judge and to ask, and other people really are the person to judge and ask, and
Well, I suppose a question you could answer more for that is, during your time doing that high unicycle act, did you see a mass proliferation of that prop in a finale of a show?
Oh yeah, no, I did. Yeah, no, well, that's the reason I stopped doing it. Yeah, no, I did. It did proliferate. It was like a rash. I can remember going. Oh, I can remember one day just going on the pitch and seeing, and I'm not exaggerating, there were like about 6 or 7 Giraffe unicycles chained up behind me on the railings, and just going, no, the time's up on this. This is just wrong. I can remember going out on the piazza and being like the 3rd or 4th unicycle act. Now, when I started, I was the only real, like I say, I wasn't the only person riding a unicycle. Eddie Izzard was doing an escape on the unicycle, but my kind of unicycle show, I was the only person doing it. So I guess maybe that's what Silver was saying. And
when you say your kind of unicycle show, you're talking about getting the volunteers out, you climb on the volunteers, then you prep, you do your hat line, you juggle.
I get the kid out to give you the clubs. I mean, Chris and Alex had the kid giving them the clubs, so I didn't invent that. But there's stuff like giving a chocolate bar. The kid, I'd got to jump up and down the chocolate bar, and then at the end of it, I'd go, thank you very much. And then I'd go, oh, by the way, hey, come back here. No one leaves this show empty-handed except me. And I'd get a chocolate bar out, exactly the same kind, and I go, there you go. And he wants to go, and I put it down, and of course the kid couldn't reach. And I was sort of playing oblivious. Now that's not essentially 100% a unique original gag as such, but the way I did it kind of was. But then everyone started to do that on unicycle shows. They started to do the kid thing, give them money and stuff like that. So it sort of became incorporated.
And how did that make you feel, seeing bits that you believed were stuff you developed being incorporated in other people's work?
It was like this osmosis, because of Covent Garden was originally, it was a really creative and varied place, and people were very experimental, and we used to play around with each other and try things out. But then gradually it became more stagnant. That's a bit harsh to say, stagnant, but there was this osmosis where there's so many people working day after day doing the same group of people. There was no flow there, so this sort of osmosis happened with people's routines and gags, and one person would get a whistle, and then suddenly 15 acts in Covent Garden were using whistles, and stuff like that. Someone had a straitjacket, and 6 months later there were 10 straitjacket shows happening. So it was kind of this osmosis thing that would happen in Covent Garden.
And were people actively trying to stop it, or were people saying that this is what our art form is? What was the perception of the group at the time?
There were grumblings about originality. There always has been, and stuff, and but there was nothing definitive as far as that goes. I was just of the opinion of like, it's time for me to change, because I'd had a good run. I was doing massive shows. I used to do the first show of the day, and I'd have the whole of the piazza all to myself. And I had a golden age of about a year, maybe 18 months, where I was the biggest show in town, or one of the biggest shows in town. And I guess a lot of performers go through that. There's a bit of a curve with that. And I was on my one. I was coming at the top of my curve there. And then I think I went out one day, and I was the 3rd or 4th unicycle act. And I can remember going, some acts would take the unicycle out at the beginning. I think I left mine. And when I brought mine out, I'd had a bit of an audience. And I brought the unicycle out. They actually went, oh, and they walked off. And I just went, I was standing there like a mug with my unicycle, and the totem that you bring to an audience to flock to see this great tall thing, it wasn't working because they'd already seen 3 unicycle shows, and they actually saw my unicycle. They were into me before I brought the unicycle out. And when I brought the unicycle out, they'd go, oh no, not that again. And then I thought, no, I've got to do something else. I just
it must have been difficult though, right? You've got a working show which you've honed and developed, and you've got to trash it essentially.
It was more of a feeling of, I'm not enjoying this because I'm getting this reaction on my doorstep, on my workplace. This is not really fun. It's not creative for me anymore. I'm sort of it wasn't. Yeah, it was just like, I hate. I'm too in. I don't know. It's an insecurity thing, but I hate doing. Being the same as other acts. I mean,
but you want to feel some value in what you're doing, and if you're doing the same thing as a person next to you, that could undermine your value, I suppose.
Yeah, it's just, I find it a bit embarrassing if you go out with it. They've just seen 2 unicycle acts, and you go out with a unicycle. It's just a bit embarrassing.
And so
I just got fed up with it.
What did you do about it then?
I decided to do a new show, and I think I was gonna do a sort of Dr. Stewart mime, maybe following thing. And then I just went, for some reason I had an idea. Oh, that's right. I had a paddling pool and a big hoop with bubble mixture in the paddling pool. And I was going to do this show where I'm going to draw this big bubble. I thought that's a great starting point. I'll start with that and see where it goes. And then around that point, I met this chap called Christopher Gibbs, who I saw doing freestanding back summies to the step on the piazza to about 5 people, and earning whatever 50p, doing these amazing acrobatic things. And I sort of went over to him and says, hey guy, I can you want to see the world? Yeah, stick with me. I think we got on, and that's right. We went to Ural, the Ural Festival in Terschelling. Tony Anthony used to arrange some performers to go to this beautiful island in Holland and this fantastic festival, which is all outdoors. And I'd been there once or twice before, and this time I went there with Tony Anthony and Chris Gibbs. And the great thing about Ural was, at least in my mind anyway, was like you always try something new, and it's a great place to play and explore. When we got there, I just remember saying to Chris, hey, do you want to try a double act? Should we try a double act? So we went out with this hoop and paddling pool. I still can't remember what we did. I mean, but we played around and improvised, and we had a laugh. I remember I'd get this hoop out and I'd say this is a hoop. And I'd say to the audience, what's Dutch for hoop? And someone would shout out, Hoople. And I go, oh, thank you. And then the smart Alex in the audience would shout, Hoople up. And everyone would burst out laughing and find this hilarious. And then we discovered the Hoople up it's like a swear word. It's like a, slingy rook, or it's a bit ruder than slingy rook. But so every show we went out and said, here's a hoop. What's Hoople? And then Hoople up. So that was our first gag in the show. And then Chris went, we did that and we played around. It was good fun. Then Chris went to Australia for a bit. And then I think it was about a year.
Just before we go on, so you're doing there in Denmark. What are you actually doing then? Is he jumping through the hoop acrobatically?
You got it.
Yeah.
That was the finale. I think he did a dive forward roll through the hoop. Yeah.
Did the drawing with the bubble liquid ever work?
Do you know, I tried it for years. I took that bloody hoop and paddling pool around the world for years. I never got it to bloody pull a bubble. Never.
But you
I
kept
even
trying.
I did. Yeah. It was. I think. Yeah. It was. It was rather erratic. It happened sometimes, but it became non-essential to the show. Let's say.
Yeah.
We sort of elbowed it out over time.
So what was the first show like? Because we kind of glossed over it a little bit, the content of it. The finale's jumping through the hoop, but what are you guys doing together? We introduced the hoop, and then we've got...
Yeah. Do you know, that's a great... I've got an awful memory, and I honestly, it's very vague of what we actually did in the show. I just... Oh God, I wish I could remember. We improvised a lot. I know that. I know we improvised a lot with the environment and the people around, but we must have had some routines. I can't remember, Matt. I can't remember.
Well, after you did that first set of routines, first set of shows in the festival in Holland, did you guys decide, well, this is working, let's keep this going?
Yeah. And then we did. We must have recognized something. We were having good fun with it, and then we said, well, let's maybe carry on with it. And then Chris went off to Australia for a few months, and I was doing some... I'm probably still in Covent Garden doing a solo show, maybe with my paddling pool, maybe not. And then he came back, and a few months later, and then I think we had the conversation of like, hey, should we go for this? And we both decided to actually give it a proper go. And then I think that was in about 92, if I remember. And then we said, right, sort of shook hands and went, right, let's do this. And then we were thinking, what should we call ourselves? And that's always terrible. And we're coming up with this big, all right, you write 10 names and I'll write 10 names. And then we would just go through all these awful names. And then I suddenly went, hey, we were given a name in Terschelling. And what? And Chris went, what? Hoople op? Bugger off. And I went, no, let's just call it Hoople. And I spelt it differently, Hoopal. And ever since then, people came up to us and went, oh, so you're Hoopla. And we'd go, no, we're Hoopal. And that was how we got the name.
And so when you began, you said, let's make a go of this. What's the writing process like? Do you guys sit down now with a pen and paper and bits of paper on the wall and, string going from bits of paper to figure out what's going to happen in the show? How do you develop it?
Yeah, that's it basically. Yeah, and also on our days off, we just had a laugh. I mean, Chris was, Chris had never done really. I mean, he did some solos in Australia, but he really hadn't really had any performing experience much apart from that. So he'd only been going like a year, if that really. So we just built the show up literally brick by brick from the very basics, and it went through several evolutions. And but we were always quite good at improvising, and there was always this weird connection between us where one of us would have an idea, the other one would sort of misunderstand it and take it forward, and then the first person would go, wow, that's good, and then they enhance that, and it was a very good dynamic, and which we didn't wholeheartedly appreciate at the beginning, but we had something. And I don't know, I can't really explain it, but it was...
Well, I can say from reading reports, because all that exists from what I can tell doing research before is people writing about seeing you guys, and they said that you kind of deconstructed what it was to be a performer. There was meta theatre. There was theatre talking about being theatre.
Yeah, I think we did after a couple of years, but we had to construct it first. And then I think for the first 2 years, you're right though. That's good. That is quite a nice description of it. The other way of putting it is arsing about. but that's another good description of it. I'd say, if I'm being honest, the first 2 years it was rough as hell. We did 2 winters in Covent Garden and literally tore it out of the cobbles. We tore a show out of nothing because we had nothing. We had no props to speak of. We just had this little suitcase. Admittedly, at the end, Chris would do an amazing acrobatic tumble. But hey, I did a forward roll as well. And but that was it. That was the skills at the very end. The rest of it was all play between us. And no juggling, no passing, nothing like that. And
so did you just crunch out on the cobbles? Just did shows every day and slowly understood what worked?
Really. And it was like going in there with no money and then making £5 each, which was enough for our bus fare back and maybe a bit of dinner and our fare back in the next morning and start from nothing again. It was really hand to mouth. I mean, I remember one winter we really were like hand to mouth. We'd come in skint. I was living in a squat in Willesden Junction somewhere, and it was just hard graft. But you know, I might be insane and deluded, but I look back on it quite fondly. I mean, it was a great. I think you can tell in your bones if you're doing something creative and worthwhile, or at least even if it's fulfilling for you, then that's it. Maybe you are off on a wrong thing and the audience think you're crap, but if you're being fulfilled by it, then there's some worth in that at least. So it was definitely something. I mean, money certainly wasn't the spur. And but we were getting something together. I tell you when it really happened for us. I think it was other people. It's always been other people. Other people have sort of been really kind and complimentary, because I don't think you see it yourself. At least I don't. And it takes other people to go, oh, I really like that, and that's really great, and you should keep that in, and I'd sort of go, oh, I didn't realise that was a good bit. I thought that was just a off the cuff, whatever, incidental. So you become aware from people's comments. That's the great thing about Covent Garden. It was such a beautiful learning ground for that, because you could have time to evolve stuff. And I remember Kino saying, any show, you need 2 winters in Covent Garden to run a show in. You know, and I don't know. Some people perhaps can write a show and take it out and do it, and it will be done. You know, but I've never had the good fortune to actually do shows that way. Mine have always been hard graft, sort of, you know, through gritted teeth and blood, sweat and tears, and just worked in and improvised and evolved and played. And,
so can I just get this clear? So you say that the routines that you picked in Hoople that really, you know, carried on, those routines, a lot of them were where people would say, oh, this is really good, you should keep using that, that's great.
Yeah, there were loads. I mean, not all of it. It wasn't 100% from that motivation, but a lot of it was feedback from that, and a lot of it was like peers. A lot of it was the audience laughing, just going, "Oh, that worked. We'll keep that in."
And just one question I want to ask before we move on from this. I've read glowing reports of Hoople being, you know, as we said, deconstructive of performance and, you know, meta theatre and all these lofty titles that don't always get ascribed to street performance. Did you guys know or feel at the time that you were working on something that would be described in this way, that it was creative in that way, that it was insightful?
No, not at all. I mean, it's very flattering, and getting any compliments like that is, of course, it's just a massive boost to the ego. But it was not. We never contrived to be that, or we were just having a laugh. Let's be honest. We were doing what we liked. I guess I don't think we made a conscious decision, but we were definitely of the same style, personality, to not be condescending to the audience. And you know, I wouldn't describe it as being really intelligent street theatre or anything like that. It was just not being condescending. It was just like, we can do better than the standard shtick. Let's do something that we like, and something that comes from us, and something that made us laugh backstage before we went on. All right, you stick that in. We'll go on. You stick that in at that bit. And it was really, it's a different dynamic. If I'm going out solo, then I have a different job on my hands. But when you're with someone that you are lucky enough to really click with, which I did with Chris, that was a really special partnership. It doesn't come along very often. And when you have that, then you can play with anything. You say, right, I'm going to pull out a bag of crisps, and I know that my partner will go with me and we'll end up doing something. It might not stay in the show, but I know that we'll do something with it. And so developing that with another person is a great creative environment to have. It's a great creative place to come from. I was very lucky, and I've worked with lots of people, and I love working with other people. They're great. But with Chris, there was something a little bit more. There was something a little bit extra special there, and I if I could tell you what it is or bottle it, I'd be a millionaire. So I can't tell you that. But going back to the other point, very quickly, just to illustrate the point of not having a plan and developing the show. There were a couple of routines. We had a kid routine. I wanted to do my chocolate bar routine initially, but then we decided to do a different sort of test for the kid. And I remember one thing, we would have a test of bravery and get the kid to stare straight, and we'd be doing things behind him. And one of the tests, Chris would get an old cardboard carton of an old drink carton, empty one, and he'd put it behind the kid, and we would go, stop, okay, look straight ahead. And then Chris would jump up on it, and it would make this bang. And some shows there wasn't a carton there, so we'd have to ditch that part of the routine. And then I think it was Sham came up one day and said, hey guy, why don't you just use a balloon and you can pop it every time? You don't have to go rummaging in the bins every time for a carton. And we kind of both went, oh. And it's like those little tips that people would give along the way. So we got a balloon, and then the balloon became a whole nother routine. That developed into this whole routine with this balloon and the kid and pins and daggers and chopping arms off, and it just went off and one. And then the other illustration was, I've just remembered, is a great one. We had a banana skin routine where we would we'd have a camera, and I think one day I found this banana skin by the pitch, and so I just sort of grabbed it, and someone was walking through the edge, as they do, and there was and I just chucked it in their path as they walked towards it, and as they got past it, the anticipation of the audience was like that, and it was great. So I picked it up again. I thought I'd try the old clown thing. If it worked, do it again. So I don't know if it's her first rule of clowning. Anyway, so I did that a few times. So we'd start this other thing of, before every show, I'd go around the bins looking for a banana skin. And I remember going, Chris, do you know what? I really wish we could do that banana skin routine every show, but sometimes I just can't find a banana skin. And Chris looked at me with this deadly, slightly puzzled look on his face and looked at me straight with, we could buy a banana. And I went, oh, this big light came on. I went, yeah, brilliant. And I think it's times like that where you need someone else you're working with, or an outside eye, to actually point out the bleeding obvious. It was just so fun. And we could equally be stupid. I mean, Chris could do things just not see the way, and then I could go, look, let's do it this way. So that's kind of like the working pro. Does that make any sense?
It makes a lot of sense, and it seems like you guys really played. You did what lots of performers talk about going out and doing. You played with each other. You threw things out there and saw what came of it. And it doesn't seem surprising by that you end up with incredibly creative work. I wanted to talk about the Shakespeare routine, which is...
Oh, by the way, just before the Shakespeare routine, if anybody has any footage of Hoople, I'd be very grateful if they could send it in at any point. I mean, because I want to, like you said at the beginning, there's no sort of documentation of it. There's nothing online because we sort of, I don't know, there's not a lot of footage. I've got some, and I'm going to put it up soon. But if anyone else has got any footage, I'd love to see it or send it in. Or
if you want to message me, I can forward it to Pete. That's no problem, because I know Pete doesn't have a huge presence on Facebook. In fact,
no, I've got a website. I've got a website, petermielniczek.com. It's my name, petermielniczek.com. No one ever goes there. But if you've got something, you can go petermielniczek.com. You can message me on that. I mean,
cool.
that is my only link to the 21st century.
Well, you got a Vimeo account. You got a Vimeo account.
Yeah, I've got a Vimeo account. I do respond to emails. But sorry to interrupt. You were talking about Shakespeare.
So, well, I don't know when to bring this up, because there's two things I want to hit on at this point. I want to hit on, because I know that the group was incredibly successful. So I want to touch upon that. But also at the same time, I want to talk about the Shakespeare routine, because I read it when I was doing the research for the show. And also Glenn Singer's just mentioned it in the comments. He saw it in Edmonton. I think it's a very interesting routine, but does that routine get developed after you sort of reach more of a kind of success, when you're more recognized, or is that earlier on?
That's interesting. The Shakespeare routine, I think. Now, I'm trying to remember whether it was for street or stage. I seem to remember us sort of coming up with the embryonic idea in Belgium, so that must have been a street gig. And then when I think what Glenn Singer's talking about, where we did it in Edmonton, I think it was a Late Night Madness. So we were doing the street festival, and we wanted something for the stage. And we hadn't really done any cabaret or stage work. So it was the time for this embryonic Shakespeare routine. And I think that was one, if not the first time, it was maybe the second time we'd done it. But it hadn't formed yet. But at that time, I'm pretty sure that Glenn Singer's talking about, the Late Night Madness in Edmonton, it sort of really came alive. I think we did it, and it just went mad. And that was another thing. That's the other thing about a creative environment.
Can you explain what the routine is for people who might not know?
Chris would come out, and we'd both come out and we'd go something like, we'd basically tell it, like explain exactly what we were going to do. So we'd come out and go, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of, we'd like to do something a bit more sophisticated now. There's a lot of stuff. We're from, we'd like to, how do we put it? I think we said something like, we would like to give you a gift from England, because we were in Canada, that's right. So yes, we'd like to do something a bit more cultural for you now, for you Canadians. Yes, we'd like to give you something a bit more cultural from England. We'd like to perform the sonnets of William Shakespeare. But while Chris reads the sonnets, we'd like to drag Shakespeare into the 21st century. So while Chris reads the sonnets, I shall throw things at him. And we kind of did it very pompously and very condescendingly. We said, yes, as sort of a gift from us, from England, the land of William Shakespeare, to you here in Canada, the land of... And then Chris would say, William Shatner. And yeah, that's good. And then we'd start the routine. And basically, Chris would start to read the sonnets. Oh, and thus I was, blah, blah, blah. And I would start, and there was I'm not going to go through the whole routine, but it escalated. It started off with a tennis ball. And I had a big bucket of tennis balls, and then I pulled another bucket. It was water and towels, and there was all sorts of swing ball, and there was tennis rackets, and God knows why. It just went on for ages. Chris just getting it in the nut, getting it in the cake hole, and he was marvelous. I mean, he would just read, and and then if it got really too close, you go, and thus the thrower threw the ball too hard upon the head of his partner, and there were little things like that. There was lots of games going on in it, and it was just really good fun, and it just was really chaotic. But the thing I really liked about it was the dynamic with the audience, because the balls were flying out into the audience, and so there was an element of danger. No one was going to get hurt with a tennis ball, but it had a really nice, theatrically it was quite exciting. Yeah.
Well, I think this is a bit clever about it. You're taking something quite pompous and then something which is extremely slapstick. You know, it's something which doesn't have that pretension and just mashing them together.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, essentially, it was sort of like it's like a clown thing of like a really stupid idea that only sort of a clown would do. It's like, hey, I've got a brilliant idea. Let's do Shakespeare and I'll throw things at you. And the other one, yeah, that's a really good idea. It's like absurd. And you embrace it and it becomes really funny. I enjoyed it.
So when was your big break then? Because Hoople was a reasonably successful international festival double act. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, we got a lot of help from initially with the street, and then we did the fringe festivals in Canada. We actually, our first theatre show was in New Zealand, but say that was in 97. So let me go. So we started working in 92. So from 92 to 96, we were doing street. So that's 4 years building it up and getting good. We got a good reputation in Europe, and we were doing big festivals in Europe, and they loved us. And we had some big successes in Europe, and because we were very physical, it helped the show. When we were working in Germany and France, we'd had to cut out a lot of the yakking, but it made us more physical, and that developed that side of the show, and that was very good. It toned us up physically, and then we went to. In 95, we went to Christchurch, New Zealand, and that's when we flew. No, I don't mean we flew to New Zealand, but that's when the show flew, and really it came alive, and there was a new audience, a new atmosphere. And New Zealand is still, I mean, it's still my spiritual home. It was Hoople's spiritual home because we said that because it was like, it just, I don't know, it just gave some more air to it, and it just really hit its stride. I mean, we put a lot of graft in to that point. For some reason, when we got to New Zealand and the Christchurch Festival, it just flew, and we were playing and we were really enjoying ourselves, and the weather was good, and the girls were beautiful, and the beer was great, and it was just, everything was fantastic, and Jodie loved us as well. You know, that was great, and we loved Jodie. We used to go to the festival office and answer her phones, and we just had a real life. It was like freedom. It was like being a kid in a playground. I don't know. There's something liberating about New Zealand. It's the old thing of, you know, you can't be a prophet in your own land, sort of thing. When you're away from home, you leave a bit of baggage and inhibition behind, don't you? I think. And in New Zealand, we really allowed ourselves to just be playful and free in a way that we hadn't done.
Is it almost you could become the myth that you set up for yourself? As a performer, you create a myth of who you're supposed to be, and when you separate yourself from the people who know you and go, "Now I know you coming out in your bloody cardigan at 5 o'clock," you know, when you're somewhere else from that, you can be someone different. You can
it wasn't. We never intended to mythologize anything. We were really down to earth. We were really self-critical, and we used to have big fights about stuff. That's crap. You can't put that in. We were, you know, but yeah, we did have our pomposity, but we were never sort of contrived to make the show this or that. I'd say the only thing we had a very strong awareness of was trying to be as original as possible, and we didn't want to be like any other show, but we certainly weren't contriving something. I don't think we could ever have contrived what we came up with. I mean, that stuff was just, it was instinctive, and just, it came out of play. It came out of play, really, honestly.
And so what happened after New Zealand then? So New Zealand is really where you feel like you guys have flown, you've established who you are, you've really reached your peak flow. What happens after that?
Well, New Zealand was great.
Really sorry, I can hear someone at the door again. I've got to run, but please carry on. I'm going to give you 2 seconds.
I feel really. Anyway, that Matt Bowden, he's a right old. Did you see that moustache? Honestly, and he's okay. Now I feel like it's a weird dynamic. Now I'm talking to people, all you millions of people watching. So nice Christmas tree, isn't it? Oh, nice Christmas tree. Oh, it's all back to front. New Zealand was it was great. They used to have things. They used to have late night at the Ducks, and there was this bar called the Ducks Deluxe, and people would do their 20-minute version of their shows every evening.
Hello,
and
sorry. The girlfriend's supposed to be getting an Amazon package, and I'm ultra sensitive to try and answer the door for it.
did you get it?
No, I didn't. It was bloody gone again.
What they did? They did a runner.
Maybe they did. There was no one there when I went there, so they either did a runner and left, or I'm imagining things. One of the two.
Yeah. So anyway, I was just going on about the late night shows at Christchurch were great as well, and I think that was an evolution into indoors. We went back to Christchurch in '97, and we decided to do an indoor show.
Why?
Yeah, that's a good question. Where did it come from? I think we must have done when we were in Canada doing like Edmonton and stuff like that. We must have heard about the fringe festivals then, and I think Chris had made some contacts in Canada, and obviously there was a link there. People going, maybe you should do the fringe festivals. I didn't really have a handle on what that actually was, so that was one aspect. I think Chris wanted to do the fringe festivals in Canada. I had a bizarre connection. Okay, it's going back to a point you were talking about earlier about construction of the show and stuff, and how deliberate it was. I knew about this theatre in New Zealand called Bats Theatre in Wellington, and I had some mates who'd done a show there. Fergus Aitken, Mr. Fungus, and another friend of mine called David Backler. They did a duo show, and I remember one day. This is before we'd done any theatre stuff. I was in New Zealand, probably having a beer with Fergus. I can't remember exactly. Anyway, he showed me this video, this show he'd done with Dave Backler, and it was a two-hander, the two of them doing a mime physical theatre show with music and imagery and costumes in this black box theatre. And I looked at it and I was astounded, and I just went, wow, this is back to my own mime fantasies from years before. Just going, wow, this is pure mime. This is beautiful, magical, real mime, beautiful theatre. And it really tickled my mime nodes. And I had it in my head that we must do a show at Bats Theatre in Wellington. Again, it was that naive thing of like, right, that's... I'm in love with this. I have some kind of passion towards this, but I don't know exactly what it is. So when we were in New Zealand, we were talking about doing a theatre show, and let's do one at Bats. And there was a Wellington Fringe happening. So we went and we did. We were with, remember, we were with Pee Wee and Emma at the time, and I think Lula Lay were there, Mark Digby and Ali Hulibeck, a few other people. We were having a laugh. I think that was the year. It was the year, and we were booked for Wellington, and then Chris and I just hired the theatre for 10 nights, not knowing what we were doing. And the only slot left was the 10 o'clock slot, which was the shutting up the theatre slot.
When you said you hired it, you paid the money to hire.
Paid the money, paid a couple $100 to get into the Wellington Fringe, and then hired the theatre, another couple $100. This last slot was the dead slot. It was too late for anyone there. We actually, when we first got into the theatre and they was telling us how it all worked, they said, oh yeah, you'll be the last show, so you better lock up. So they went around the whole lock up thing, showed us the keys. So you lock this up, turn that fire alarm on, switch those lights off. That's the main electricity supply. Make sure you switch that off, otherwise the whole building will burn down. And do this and do that and that and take that finger, blah, blah, blah. And then lock the front door and you're all right. And we were like, just didn't know what the hell we were doing. And we put this show on and we didn't know what we were doing in the show. And it was really skin of our teeth stuff. And it was pure passion, naivety, bravado, stupidity that we went on stage that night at Bats Theatre at 10 o'clock. And we did these cobbled together routines with no structure in it. really crowbarred in, making a point of telling the audience. We were always very honest with our audience. If we didn't know what we were doing, we won't tell you at this point we don't know what we're doing. And that was always a good way of getting routines in. We'd just be completely honest that made no sense. And so anyway, we did this show, and it was rough. It was rough as hell. And I remember a couple of days later, a review came out. Was it Mark Avery? Avery was the reporter, and he was from the City Press or something in Wellington. Anyway, he wrote this review, and I remember being in the flat with Pee Wee, Emma Lloyd, a girl, Christine Taylor. She was a sort of theatrical from Canada, and someone else. And they said, "Oh, look, the review's out. The review's out." And I went, "Oh, great, let me read it." And so we're all sitting in the living room, and they said, "How did it go? What did he say?" And I read out this review, and it was like complete, blatant, amateur nonsense, rubbish. These two guys couldn't. There was one line. They couldn't give a polished performance if they were dipped in Brasso. And it was just this slagging, and it went on and on. And it was a beautiful slagging. It was very poetic slagging. It was very descriptive and colourful. And it just went on and on at how crap this show was. And the last few lines, and I can remember everyone's face, and I was like past caring at that point. I was going, "No, I was quite enjoying it. Look, this is a really good slagging." It wasn't just like you're crap. He took a lot of time into slagging us off. So I was quite optimistic about it. And I saw everyone's faces, and Pee Wee and Emma, and they were like, "Oh," they were more like this. "Oh, no." And I got to the last line, and it said, "Stupid, nonsensical, indulgent, pathetic, insulting to the intelligence." I loved it. What? And we had to read it again. And you read it again, and it was just the last three words, and it was my most precious review I've ever had for anything. It was such a brilliantly done, and just great. I loved it at the end. And so anyway, well, that was the very first Hoople indoor show, called A Quiet Night In, which was a ramshackle bundle of cobbled together sellotape, mainly gaffer taped actually, routines.
And were they some of the stuff on the street, or were they all new?
All new. No, that was a definite point. We were doing stuff absolutely for the theatre as much as we could.
What's the
streets.
What's the difference then? What's the difference between doing something for the street as Hoople and doing something for the theatre?
That's a good question. Well, our street stuff was quite theatrical anyway, because we were quite theatrical, because that's a really weird term, because everything's theatrical if you watch it. It's theatre, isn't it? But it was it was theatrical because it was a relationship between us. It was me and Chris and that relationship. And so we created a world and our relationship and our responses and our emotions and everything to anything, whether it's someone in the audience, a dog, a pigeon, or a prop. We endowed it. So we were always very theatrical with what we did in that respect. But when you're doing street, you spend far more energy getting your audience to love you, watch you, like you, stay and pay. When you're in a theatrical space, I think there's a bit of that burden comes off, and they're stuck there. You still want them to love you and not leave, walk out, but there's a less energy expended on that. And so you can be more subtle, you can be more eccentric. If you're on the street, and I've seen you do this as well, if you really have the audience, their attention, you can become small and subtle, and you can play tiny moments. But there's a lot of work to get that focus from a street audience. But indoors, I think you have you get there quicker. You have that attention, and so I reckon that's the only real difference. Our stupidity was still the same. We just came up with new routines and new ideas, and I think stuff like acoustics is different as well. We had this squeaky toy routine, which is fantastic, where we both had this squeaky toy. I'm not sure that would have worked on the street. We started to mime insults to each other, this squeaky toy, and we'd have this argument. And I think stuff like that you wouldn't necessarily get away with on the street because it's a bit.
There's not the focus.
Not focus. It's more clowny. It's more. It needs more focus, and also physically, that I don't think the sound perhaps would have carried much further than maybe 2 or 3 people in the front. So there's technical differences for theatre, but I think they lead on to stylistic differences. So I think I don't know if that answers it, but
I think that's quite a reasonable answer.
Yeah, and so anyway, so it was really nice doing fresh material as well,
and so the stage show. It seems like, since we're talking about the ascent of Hoople, the stage show was the beginning of something new that you carried on doing, right?
Yeah, and then we were very lucky. We had this great work in progress. So it was rough as hell at Wellington. Then we did it at the. Why did we do it first? We did it at. That's right. We went to Melbourne. So Wellington finished around March, April. We were in Melbourne, and we got picked up at the Last Laugh, a comedy club in Melbourne. They were doing this group with I think it was People Like Us were playing at the Last Laugh. They'd had enough. They were jumping ship. So there was a vacancy, and we sort of turned up in town with our knapsacks, and we did a late night variety show there one night, and we did our Shakespeare routine. And I can remember the guy. It was a big, rough old, 200-300 seater Aussie comedy club. And I remember the compere. I wish I could remember his name, but he gave us this really snidey introduction. I went, here's a couple of poms. Apparently they're really wacky and funny. Anyway, let's see what they got to do. Sort of introduction. That was really horrible. And we went out and we just played the audience from the beginning, and we just had the audience from the beginning. We just got a laugh as soon as we walked out for some reason, and we did the Shakespeare routine, and we brought the house down. I mean, it roared, and it's one of those lucky moments that we happened to be on form that hit it right. The audience were really into us, and then it was sort of a bit of a Hollywood thing. Afterwards, we were sitting having a beer, and the bookers for the club came up and said, "Hey, hi, I really enjoyed your show. Here's a contract. Would you like to sign?" So we were quite flattered. So we filled in for People Like Us. We did about 2 or 3 months there at the Last Laugh. So that was a really tough gig, and that toughened up our routines. We were doing bits from the Bats theatre show there, but it made it we had to really, really hone it and get it, because they were tough or
when you
drunken.
said it was tough, did you ever fail? Was it tough?
I think we failed every night, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, some nights were just awful. Some nights it was just going out to a baying mob. It's almost not worth it. Some nights were better. It was tough, but it toughened us up, and it certainly got the routines tight. But yeah, it was one. I mean, some nights wouldn't. I remember one night a guy sitting right near the front. He had a table. He was sitting all to himself, and he had empty stubbies all around the table, like the battlements of a castle. And he drunk about 20 of them, and they were all lined up, and he had a full one in his hand. We came out on stage. Before we'd even done anything, he just went. He hardly even looked up. He went, "Pommy bastards!" like that. And that was it for the rest of our time. He didn't stop. He was every 30 seconds, "Pommy bastard." So some nights were like that. I was like, God. But after that, we were, long story short, we went to Canadian Fringe late that summer. I think we did Winnipeg, and then not Joseph Selig.
Did you feel good to be leaving the Australian gig then? The Last Laugh.
It felt a relief to leave the Last Laugh. In fact, we were the last laugh at the Last Laugh. The theatre closed after us.
Wow.
Oh, God. It did. It shut down. We were the last thing on there. Us, Tom Comet, Christine Taylor, and Hoople, Last Laugh, and then it moved to another premises, but it shut. It was a lovely place. I did have a good time there when I wasn't on stage. I had a good time in Melbourne. It was lovely, nice 3 months.
And so you go back to, I assume you go back to England and then on to Canada.
Yeah, something like that.
Are you doing street shows still now? Are you still going to Covent Garden and doing the shows in Covent Garden in between doing the festival gigs?
No, I think by that time we were kind of we weren't really playing Covent Garden much. We were doing European gigs, Canadian, New Zealand, and a bit of Australia. We didn't really play in Australia. That was only the one time we played in Australia.
And were you not doing the street because you didn't have to? You felt like your career had evolved off of the street? What was the...
No, I think we did do Covent Garden bits, but we weren't regular there. I don't think, if I remember correctly, we weren't hard grafting it down there because I don't think we probably needed to. I think we did do some down there. You know, we weren't like boycotting it or something. We just we didn't have to, so we didn't. I think it's probably more.
Yeah.
It was.
And so, how was Canada different to the years before then?
How do you mean?
So you're developing this stage show now. You've now got this killer street show that's been kind of honed and formed, and then you go over and do the Canadian festivals. I assume that there's no stasis, that things change. So it's just a lead in to talking a bit more about Canada and how that was different from what came before it.
Well, the first time, say in like 95, 96 or whatever, when we were doing Edmonton and Halifax and places like that, doing street stuff. And then when we went back doing the fringe circuit, that was a whole other circuit. We were doing both the first time, if I remember. So we'd do like Edmonton and Winnipeg fringe, and they both had street festivals at the same time. Winnipeg was a bit, yeah, but Edmonton was a massive, I mean, the street fringe there was really, really good. They had stages set up, you know, PAs and radio mics all set up for you, and it was really well organized and set up. And so we were doing an indoor show in the evening and 2 street shows every day. Oh, I don't know if I could do that now, but we worked our butts off, and there was always the theory that we'd publicize the theatre show with our street shows, but I never ever really totally believed that. I'm still dubious as to whether that ever worked. I think our theatre audience was our theatre audience, and our street audience was our street audience. I don't think there was that much of an overlap. I could be wrong, but I don't think there was. Anyway, that was the idea. We'd do a street show, plug the indoor show, and then that's great. So I think we did 3 Canadian fringes, 3 years, and we built up. The first year, a few people saw us. Sensible Footwear came. They were Brits. They saw us in Winnipeg. They loved us. And then the word of mouth really spread. And then the second year, we had built up a following really quickly. The nice thing about the Canadian fringes as well is the word of mouth can spread from town to town as you go. I think from the east to the west, or is it the west? You go from the east to the west, and you go from one fringe, and then the reviews and stuff, and the word of mouth passes on down the trail.
It's a touring circuit, right?
Yeah, yeah. So you know, you start off in Halifax and end up in Vancouver, and then by the time you get to Vancouver, the word is, if they're kind, you've got a bit of a reputation already before you get into town. So that's another good thing about the Canadian fringes. Yeah.
Were you guys still in the same mindset in the work? Were you still experimenting and constantly playing and putting new things in?
Oh yeah. I mean, it was such a laugh. We always used to have a laugh, and we would always put new stuff in, and it was always because it kept the show fresh, but it kept us fresh, and it's kind of what we did. And we were just mischievous kids. We used to just play around all the time. And it was great being on the road as well, because, you know, we'd have, like I said, we'd have contretemps and disagreements and stuff. But most of the time we were just these two young guys out traveling around the world on the road, just having a laugh. It was really quite great. And we always put stuff in the show and always wouldn't screw each other up. We'd never screw each other up, but we were always chucking things out the
You were
blue to make
testing, right? You going, let's see what you can do with this.
Yeah, keep you on your toes.
Yeah.
And you know, more often than not, it would actually turn into something. We go, we'll keep that in. That's a new routine there. We could keep that in. So that was always on.
So why are you not talking about Hoople touring this year? You know, and Hoople still is a thing. It seems like it was such a wonderful marriage of two individuals and kind of a joined creative practice.
I don't know. Well, Chris sort of went off and did his own thing in Canada. He got married to a wonderful Canadian girl, and sort of, I think he decided to. I shouldn't say. That sounds rude to say he ploughed another furrow. Can I say that? He made a decision. He was going to sort of set up family life in Canada with his lovely wife, and it just sort of, I don't know. It kind of weirdly dispersed, and I can't really give you a reason or why or how, but it just stopped. I don't know. I mean, talk to Chris. Get Chris on this.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
It'd be interesting. He's brilliant. I mean, he's hilarious as well and everything. So,
how did you feel when? Because obviously, I assume that Chris has got this new life beginning there. It's not a slow burn. You sort of talk about it. You talk through it. How do you feel about it at the time?
well, I was upset, and I thought Hoople had a bit of a way to run, but you know, the thing is I think with a double act, if one person says I don't want to do the double act anymore, there's nowhere to really go with that. I mean, that's just there's no negotiation there. It's like, oh, okay, well, right, then the double act's finished. No, you really do about that, can you?
But do you ever see Hoople coming back again? You know, the Hoople reunion tour or something like this?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I always thought at the time it had a lot more stuff to do, a lot more creativity left in it. But then the other side of me goes, it's like the fat old gits doing the pop band reunion. I would hate for Hoople to ride again, and you know, and anymore. That would be terrifying, wouldn't it? I don't think that would be true.
People sitting at the back of the venue. So people sitting at the back of the venue going, God, they're doing that bloody Shakespeare tennis ball bit again.
Yeah, God. Well, I mean, the thing is, actually, it might be so many people haven't seen it that we could get away with it, because I don't. There's a lot of people who haven't seen it.
Well, I
don't know. Ask Chris.
I really enjoyed looking at the routines. I really enjoyed it, hearing about them, talk to people about the routines. I found them fun and inspiring. You know, really cool routines. But you know, we're reaching very close to the end. We've got the last 15 minutes. We've been an hour and 45. So I feel like there's other stuff we can talk about in your life, moving on from Hoople. So what happened after you guys stopped working together?
I went back to, it was quite abrupt for me. So I ended up back in London. What did I do? It all happened. Hoople broke up. I think I split up with my girlfriend. I was going to a wonderful Australian girl, and I think we split up.
Oh, when it rains, it pours.
No, that's right. We split up. I started doing a solo routine on the street in Melbourne, and then I think I did it in New Zealand, and I hung on for about a year between Australia and New Zealand. Then it all went to hell. That's right. And then I ended up in London a year after. And and then I think I was on a bit of a downer, to be honest. But I crashed at Alex's for a while, and there was a hard. Then I persuaded Alex to do a double in Ural, and I think we did a show in Ural together, street show. We did a walkabout, a Dracula and Van Helsing walkabout. Alex was dressed up with fangs as Dracula. Yeah, look into my eyes, and I was a sort of belligerent Van Helsing. Don't look in his eyes. I think that's all we basically did with that, and we ran around the island. Alex was running around. Stop following me. Leave me alone. Come chase me with a crucifix. We climb up a tree, and I go, "Why don't you turn into a bat?" No, leave me alone. I don't want to turn into a bat. And I remember having a right laugh. We did street shows together as well, and so yeah. Then I was pottering around doing various this and that. I did a bit of street, Covent Garden. Then I had a bit of a breakdown. Then I went off the rails a bit.
Was this just trying to rediscover what your life would be, because you spent so many years developing something?
I think it was probably deeper than that. I think it was a deeper sort of malaise that I had that I needed to sort out. But unfortunately, I think I needed to hit a rock bottom before I sorted it out. So things sort of declined, and I was still doing gigs and solo things and bits here and there. But then it got a bit rough, and then I ended up sort of basically going into rehab, and then after that I got clean, and then that was good, and then I sort of picked up again.
And started to develop solo work again. Started developing solo work again.
Yeah. Developing solo work again. And yeah, I'm just working with lots of people here and there, and I've done little collaborations with lots of different people, and just doing street stuff mainly, almost essentially. Done a bit of cabaret, and that's it. And at the moment, I'm working on a new show with Charlotte, which is really exciting. We're doing some really silly, good stuff. I don't know if you know Charlotte Palmer.
Oh, we interviewed Charlotte Palmer, I think,
right.
a couple of months ago. Yeah.
Oh, actually, you didn't tell me. No, I haven't seen anyone for 9 months. That's why. This is really weird, this experience, actually, because I'm being so retrospective about stuff I haven't thought about for ages. And it's made me realize how disconnected it's really good, but it's also made me realize how disconnected I am over this sort of past 9 months of like not being able to perform. And I mean, there's a million anecdotes that I just can't remember because I just sort of floated away. It feels like I floated offshore a bit. You know what I mean? And this is nice. It feels like,
drifted off and left it behind.
Yeah. And this is like dragging me back in again.
Well, the bitty possibly Godfather moment.
It is but it is nice. Yeah. It is nice. So yeah, I'm really well. I think we all are, aren't we? Chomping at the bit. So I've got some nice ideas with Charlotte. I want to develop a totally new solo show, street show, and so that's in process at the moment.
I looked through your website and it had stuff about you doing things in galleries, about doing installation and.
Oh yeah, I forgot all about that. Yeah, so so that's right. There was rehab, and then I came back and I did a few gigs, and then I decided that I wanted to go to art school. So I went and spent 3 years at Camberwell Art School and got an art degree. So that was really interesting. That's kind of something I was always quite interested in, and I wanted to get it.
How interesting is that? At the beginning of this story, you talked about your friends being in art school and about wanting to, being an imposter and.
Exactly, and it's these little seeds that find their germination at some point down the line. You never know when. That's exactly right. It's very, very perspicacious of you, and that's right. And I used to gate crash parties at Camberwell Art School back in my youth, and I ended up going to Camberwell Art School. I guess it wasn't a direct design, but it must have been subliminally there, leading me on that trail.
Well,
So
as well, you've not led a career of doing hack schlock shows. You've done creative, experimental, interesting things. You know, it does seem like you've had the concept of being an artist, you know, furrowed in the back of your head, you know, while doing the practice of street performance and entertainment.
yeah. I guess that's true. I guess there was that side of things. I was always fascinated and excited and inspired by that. I've always loved, you know, sculpture and painting and just all that stuff. But there was a lot of that in Covent Garden. There was so much artistry in Covent Garden when I got there, and the people working there, you know, Patricia Martinelli, she was doing a mime show, totally original work. So I was being fed all this stuff. It was fantasy and pretension, perhaps you could say. But then I saw people doing it for real. And there was the Mime Festival as well. I remember when I first started in the 80s, the London Mime Festival was amazing, the stuff that you could see there. And that was all, you know, Circus Lumiere and, you know, Les Bubb, he was street and theatre, and moving picture mime show. Nickelodeon, they did street and theatre. And so the path was well trod before I was, you know, whatever, like you say, trying to be artistic or whatever. There were plenty of people to aspire to, you know.
And so we are reaching the very last bit. I think we're on the last 6 minutes now. So is there any advice you want to give to young performers who want to go and do creative work, you know, get away from... Are you annoyed at the fact that street shows are quite similar? Most street shows you see nowadays have a structure which is almost cookie cutter. Is that something that frustrates you?
Would you say that?
I would say that from my own personal perception. I would say that.
Yeah. I think there is an element of that, but that's not to say there is also a great deal of originality out there. I think places like Covent Garden have suffered a bit now. There's many reasons for that: economic, political, historical, geographical, ownership of the space, blah blah blah. You know what else? But I think I don't know. I don't want to preach to anyone. I would never do that. I would just count myself lucky that I had great people to aspire to. In the late 80s and early 90s, there was a treasure of performers around me in London, on Covent Garden, on the Mime Festival, in the City Lit, on stage, off stage. I don't know, there was something about the environment then that was just nourishing. And I think Covent Garden, like a garden, you have to nourish it, don't you? You have to feed the soil and you have to put stuff in. And if you go there and just do big hat shows and formula and stuff, the garden will die, it will dry up, it will become exhausted. And I think so, you know, just I don't know if it's advice or not, but I've just tried to gravitate to a creative environment, because I don't think nobody does it on their own. We all need help, we all need a buck up, and we all need some advice and some help along the trail. And if you're around pals or people with, you know, love and friendship and some hopefully good advice, and, you know, who are creative, that's the best you can ask for. So if I was there were two bits of advice I'd give: try and look for someone or a group of people who are doing something you like and are creative and different and excite you. I think, yeah. And there's the other thing. What's the other thing? Someone told me once, yeah, you can't make an omelette without some good olive oil, a knob of butter, and just a little bit of salt and pepper.
There you go. And last thing to say, a lot of old friends, I think, have been on the thing. Patricia Martinelli's been here, Charlie Lynham, Shay Hooray, Rex Boyd, Glenn Singer, Mikhail Hessling, Andre Vincent, and Silver, to name a couple. Is there anything you want to say to your old friends that have managed to drop in and watch the video?
Oh, are they in now?
They're here now, yeah. Majority of them, yeah.
And that he used the scarf. Yeah, that's right. Andre's talking about the scarf at the end of the Shakespeare, where Chris would do the scarf at the end and finish, and a big reckon at the end, and he'd go like that. And that was the wet towel. Anyway, sorry, I got to start reading this. What was your question? Yeah, I want to say to them all that I love them all, and let's meet up soon. I mean, God, it's my family, isn't it? It's my family, so I miss them all. I guess I'd say that I miss you all. Let's have a cup of tea soon.
There you go. I will lead you into all the videos, all the comments, so you can see them after the interview. I think we're reaching the end of the interview, everyone. Pete, it's been a pleasure. It really genuinely has. I've really enjoyed us talking. I've loved hearing your story. I really have.
Thanks, Matt. It's been a great pleasure and a great, it's an honour to be invited. I appreciate that too.
Really?
And I appreciate what you're doing with this whole archive thing as well. So all the best with that.
Thanks.
That's great.
And thank you, everyone. Thank you for watching. If you can, please like, follow, share, comment. If you want to say hello to Pete, he will be checking the video after, so you can see and chat to him a little bit, hopefully. If you can join the Patreon.
PeterMielniczek.com.
There you go.
PeterMielniczek.com.
I will.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
I'll put the link at the end of the video on YouTube and on the Facebook on the Incorrigible Rogue site. So if you're on one of the other satellite sites, go to Incorrigible Rogue. I'll put the link in there. Everyone, thank you for watching. Catch you all soon. Have a good one. Bye, everybody.